students, it's my honor today to have Kyle Hoehner, who is retiring as the principal at Lexington, Nebraska. And I've known Kyle for years, and just a few things to know about him is that he was the Nebraska principal of the year and the regional principal of the year. And then a year or so later, he was one of 3 finalists for the national principal of the year. So he's had some excellent accolades and excellent experiences, and he's, in my opinion, known for his ability to help people change and help staff change. So I'm going to ask him a couple questions, and before I go to him, I want to mention that I did put a PowerPoint that Kyle had sent me, and it may not totally follow what we're talking about today, but gives you some ideas to some of the strengths and things that he tried to do with his working to help people change. So Kyle, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about your educational career and just a second or two about your administrative positions.
Right. I'm Midwestern Nebraskan for my entire life. Born in Overton, graduated from Bertrand, went to UNK, graduated with an endorsement in English and journalism. Started my master's classes 100 years ago, it seems like, and got my degree. And then for a lot of years, I was teaching at Kearney High School for 28 years, head basketball coach, coached track, baseball. That was kind of my identity, and kind of got nudged a little bit to get into administration. And quite frankly, didn't want to do it. Didn't know why, but didn't want to do it. And when I did 13 years ago, best decision I ever made. It was like I said, some people that I have a lot of faith and trust in. My wife, first and foremost, my mom, who you guys might know, they kind of nudged me along a little bit in that capacity, but I listened to people that were smarter than I was. And so 13 years ago, took over as the AD at Lexington, activities director and assistant principal, and have been the principal the last 10 years. And so, and it's been a labor of love. It's been wonderful. It's tough to retire, but that's where we are right now. I'm sure I'll get back in somehow, some way in the next, after that 6-month hiatus. But anyway, that's kind of my life. It's been right in this area, and it looks like I'm in Hawaii right now. Actually, I took that picture. It's from the Dominican Republic when we were there, but I'm actually in my living room in Lexington, for those of you that are jealous about that photo. So
you don't have palm trees in Lexington?
They do not. No, they don't. But it's good to be here. Thank you, Dr. Nelson. I appreciate you asking.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about change. And one of the questions that I think a lot of new administrators stepping into a new school, how do you determine when it's time for change?
Well, I think that can come as a result of a lot of things. I think that sometimes a school finds itself at a place, a district, or a building that it is either uncomfortable with or not very proud of. And, I think Covey recites it in his book, or brings it up in his book. I don't know. There are a lot of people that take credit for change is inevitable and growth is optional. And it's that growth piece that, I think people are okay with change as long as it's not happening every year, which some districts are known for that. We were a district that was known for that. About every 3 years, we'd roll something new out, and it was the newest, shiniest thing. And it really wore people out. And so, we were at a point at Lexington when I came in, and I got a view from the AD position to kind of see what the school was like. So I kind of had some inside information for 3 years that I spent there to see kind of how the school was run and so on, and appreciated a lot of what Dave Gordon, who was my predecessor, did, but there were some things that we wanted to do as well. And so people at that time were wanting some change. We had some of the state's lowest test scores, lowest graduation rate. Kids weren't coming to school. And probably as important, and maybe the decisive factor in that biggest deal was that kind of resulted in those other things, was we had a real relational disconnect with among staff. Kids didn't trust teachers, just a lot of that stuff going on. And so anyway, I always think that change is easier in year 1 than it is in 2 and 3. They say, if you want something done, ask for it, whether it's financial or whatever it may be in year 1, because they're willing to make a mistake that they won't make 4 years later. So in year 1, we made some mammoth changes, and we even started before then. In fact, in my third year as AD, the principal, Dave Gordon, had knee surgery, so I kind of had to do dual purpose, and part of that process was preparing for the next year. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think that people wanted change. The easy part is coming up with ideas and things you want to do, and that type of thing. It's that when you get to that point where people are so uncomfortable, they're tired, they're worn out, they can't see the end of it, they're not sure it's working, and to have things in place to continue that process. I know we made enough changes that first year that Dr. Hoehner, my mom, made a comment, "You're not going to make it to year 2 because they're either going to kill you or something." And so you really have to support your teachers and work alongside them, not above them. That is really important. And so that's kind of a picture of where we were. But we were at a place that we didn't want to be. And so I don't know if you want me to go on, but basically we took a look at where we were now. In other words, we talked to community members. We had coffee with the principal. And we're a high Hispanic population, so we had our interpreters, our translators, and we broke into 2 groups. If you're not in a district with our diversity, you still need to, I think, have this process where the community has a voice, not just parents, but the community, because there are a lot of people out there that have a true vested interest in your building. And I'm a taxpayer, doggone it, I want to know what's going on. And so you give them voice, and I think that's really important. And you ask the tough questions. What are we doing okay? And what do we need to do better? And when if it's one person saying one thing, another person saying another, you kind of, but if there's a theme there, and we had some themes that came out of that, maybe there's some credibility to that. And so what we tried to do was take those from those meetings. That's where it started, with coffee with the principal. We're sitting down. If you bring food, you have a little coffee, people will come. I think that first meeting we had 80 or 90 people from the community come in, and we didn't know if we'd have 4. We didn't know if we'd have 50, but it was really, really inspirational to see the people that cared. And there were so many things that came out of that, Dr. Nelson, that we have assumptions as principals because we have this view, and some of us may have a little wider view, but things were brought up that I didn't realize and I didn't see coming. And there were so many aha moments. So we carried on with those coffees with the principal for a couple of years. We met at the St. Anne's, the Catholic Church, to make people more comfortable because we're a high Catholic population. We met at the school. We met various places, and we kind of listened to the parents. But the parents would bring their kids, and everybody had a voice. And we kept track of those notes, translated them if necessary, and then we sent those out and posted them. And then people could respond to those things. And so that was the start. But I guess pulling back a little bit, we tried to then say, okay, here's where we are. Where do we want to be next year? Where do we want to be in 5 years, 10 years? Let's not think about that 3-year rotation, what we change and what we do, what do we want that to look like? Always keeping in mind, and this is really important, the educational landscape. What are they, you're finding out what they want locally, but what is the state requiring? What national mandates are being handed down? What can you anticipate through legislation and so on is going to happen? And some of that is a little bit of guesswork, but you kind of can see the trend and the people that are there and what people want to do. And so it's 2-part. What do we want locally? Where do we want to be? And what are we really held to? What are we going to have to do? And we kind of found out that it kind of walked together for us, which was good because we wanted to improve our test scores. You know what? Federal government wanted us to improve our test scores too. Graduation rate was atrocious. We were about 78%. And it was like, gosh, which is high for a Hispanic school. So by most standards, we were doing this really great. I don't mean Hispanic, but high poverty, high diversity. And people will say, well, if you're at 60 or you look down the road or whatever, wasn't good enough. And so we wanted that. So did the federal government. We wanted to meet AYP, which they said you can never do. And we did. So there were things out there that we wanted. So they kind of interlocked. And, with our African population, our Hispanic, our white population, all the people that we have, the one common theme is we wanted to be proud of what we were doing. and they wanted to know what we were doing. But at the end of the day, they wanted people to look at us and say, gosh, I didn't expect that. And so a lot of those things, it was, I guess, a little easier for us, I think, because we were able to combine those things. We weren't talking about two different things.
Part of the part of things, one of the things we talk about in looking at change is that there are different groups that have veto rights. Your teachers can veto something you want to, your board can veto it, and your community can't. So I think it's really wise on your part that you involved so many elements of your community in that first decisions, those types of things. What kind of resistance, or did you run into any resistance when you first started talking about making changes?
You know, not a ton. I had a superintendent at that time, Todd Chesmore, that would, you know, I always say that Todd didn't think outside the box. He created new ones. And sometimes they were, but boy, for a new guy that had all these ideas, but no basis for, well, I can tell you this works here. I have the data to prove this, but this other thing that I'm thinking about, I have no idea. He gave me the latitude to go that route. And I remember, like with the graduation rate, we started at central office, true story. Dave Gordon was in the band, and we're driving from the central office to the high school, which is about a 4 or 5 minute drive. And I said, we've got to improve graduation rates next year. What do we do? And so by the time we got to the high school, we had talked about this program that we wanted to put in place where we could maybe gift kids extrinsic earning. And what it ended up being was a laptop, $1,000 laptop for the highest graduating academic team. And then I kind of had to piece that together. But so I had his support, and that was huge. He had the board support. And so we didn't come in with this, hey, here's what we're doing next year. We sat down and said, here's kind of what we'd like to do. And we were really hard on ourselves and said, you know, we're not happy with where we are. I mean, that's the thing. And the theme that I went with our board, I found out early that they didn't want to just be like, and I don't want you to take this poorly, Dr. Nelson, and we don't want to be COZAD. We don't want to be just as good at COZAD. We want to be better than the Carneys and the Elk. We want to be thinking that way. So I found out early that Kearney got a brand new over-the-road bus. That's a lot bigger school than we are. Well, you know what? They wanted one. They didn't want to pull up to a deal for that. And that was when I was the AD. So I knew that I had that in tow. And I'd say, well, here's where their scores are. Here's where their thing, what's happening there. What do you guys want? And so it made it much easier. But I met with the superintendent. I met with the Board of Education. The toughest part are the teachers. You know, and we had a relational disconnect that was terrible. I mean, it was tough. There were people that were just, it was crazy, but they were good instructors. They were talented people. They just didn't get along very well. And so we had to find a way to do that. And so what we did to pull the teachers and the students together, we felt like it had to be, rather than come up with a set of rules or a vision, all these things that people do. Oh, here's our new vision statement. And a vision statement came out of that. And here's our purpose statement. Well, purpose statement came, we didn't start with that and then try to roll it into that. We said, okay, here's where we are. So we had the kids and the staff sat down in what we call our teacher advisor meetings the year before. And we met for about 6 weeks. And every day we dedicated to what can we agree upon as students that we will do and hold ourselves accountable to every day. It's on us. It's an agreement. We're doing this. And we had to have consensus. We had to either be here or here, but we couldn't all be down, or we found a new way to do it. And that's a long process. But we wanted buy-in, and we had to have it. So then it comes back to, well, you said, you know, but in the teachers, same thing. What can we agree upon? And so in those meetings, we came up with, we call our agreements poster. And first of all, it was building people of integrity. That's what we wanted. That's what the kids wanted. That's what we wanted. And under that, we had honesty, compassion, respect, and responsibility. Those 4 things. And underneath each of those, the teachers came up with 3 agreements. The kids came up with 3 agreements. The cool thing is, a year later, we revisited that because we put posters in every room. Every room you go through Lexington High School today, every hallway you can't get away, and you're going to find an agreements poster. That's what we hold ourselves to. A year later, we revisited, and the consensus, as a majority came in and just said, why would we change? This is who we are. And so here we were a year into that process, and we were doing those things. So that was the relational part of it. And what we found was and there were a lot of other things that we did, but the teachers and the kids were on board. That's huge. So when the board is coming into our building, and they do, they see kids and teachers working together, and that's huge. And like I said, that board. So we had that support, but what we said on the agreements, and this isn't even a word, I look it up because I keep getting a misspelling, but they're non-negotiables. In other words, this is just, we're not going to tell you a lot of stuff you can't do. We want teachers to use their talents, all those things, but they're non-negotiables. There are certain things we're going to do. Those agreements, that was what it was about. And so, that was really big. But anyway, so the resistance, long answer, we try to deal with that by bringing everybody into the process and gave everybody equal voice. And there were growing pains, and it takes time, but we got where we wanted to be.
You have to feel like you gained some trust when you first came in because you've been there before. Before Todd Chestnut was there, I did some consulting for Lexington, and you talk about the shiny item syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Anything that was new, they were trying, and that was my comment in my exit report was, "You've got some great programs, leave them," because they didn't trust. We'll do this, and a year from now we'll drop it. But you had to have that going for you. It wouldn't have occurred.
Right, and I think that on their, in their defense, I think that when you're a kid poor school, sometimes you're a program rich school. You can do some other things, and so I think people see that money and say, well, if we don't spend it, that's. I am just thinking of things that took place, and we were known as the every 2 to 3 years, and teachers were exhausted. They were worn out. And so here I came and they were going, oh no,
another new idea.
A lot different. But what we did is we tried to give them the time to make that work. And so I guess in general, what we focused on was the academic. We wanted to change the expectations and the perspective of what we were doing, who we were, and who we wanted to become. And the big part of that was a social and emotional learning component. We created an entire program that nobody else was doing. They were doing little advisor, whatever. And we committed 48 minutes to every day, a normal class period, to the social and emotional learning process for our ninth graders. And then also our upperclassmen, we had the passages class. Anyway, not going into that, but it was a real focus on the academic, first and foremost, but also the social and emotional, which were things like, we found out kids, they knew what a GPA was, but why do we use it and why is it important? Why do we do class ranks? What is a Buffett scholarship? These things that we assume that even me coming from 2 administrators in the house, there are certain things I didn't know, and I think there were assumptions made. And so we tried to really simplify it so that people could understand who we were and what things meant, really just simplify things. So
sounds like you did a great job and are continuing to do a great job, and I think your predecessor will also. Just in closing, what are some suggestions or thoughts you have about somebody who's considering administration?
Well, it's wonderful. I mean, I lived with 2 administrators my whole life. I heard the stories. I didn't want to do it because I think not that they were ever negative about it. My mom, she's very positive. My dad was a principal of my school. He was my principal, and so on. And I just didn't want to. And I love teaching and I love coaching. But I'm going to tell you what, somebody came to me one day and said, you know what? Because I didn't want to give up the relationships. As you can tell, probably I'm a relationship guy. And it was Trent Steele, who's now at Papillion Public Schools, who was my sophomore basketball coach at that time. And this job from Lexington came along, and I said, I love my principals, and they did a great job, but I didn't want to do what they appeared to be. I just didn't seem like they didn't seem as, and they're outstanding principals. I love them, but I just didn't think that was me. And he said, you will define that when you're the boss. You define what that position looks like, that made a lot of sense. And the other thing that he said was, you love coaching. Well, you get to coach at that time, coach all the coaches. And then if you become a principal, you get to coach all the teachers, and you get to put things in place, because I love strategy and I love planning and all those things. And those things came about. But if you do go through change, one thing that I didn't mention, it's really important. A couple things real quick, and I know I'm running out of time. Look inside at yourself. Don't look outside for the new shiny things. Look at yourself, because every school is unique, and you have rock stars in your building. Find out what they're doing that turns kids on to learning, and then share that in a way that you don't put that person above, but you work as a team and then start doing those things. Cause that's what we did with when we went in. Share those great ideas and develop that sense of teamwork. Systemic change has got to be data driven so you can prove it. And that trust we talked about, how can we prove it's working? And so it's got to be in place. And the other thing, most important probably is anything, everybody has to feel it. If you're going to do systemic change, it has to be felt by every stakeholder in the building, community, and so on. So again, lots of stuff. I put my email on there. Even though I'm retiring, I will have that email. So if you have questions as aspiring principals, love to talk to you. I love to talk about this stuff. I could go on, and Dr. Nelson's kind of giving me the cue to shut up. So I'll do that. But no, he's not really. He's being so kind, but I know I'm over time. But just a lot of good stuff. And maybe we can help you avoid some of the things that we did that were a little tough. But you can do it. It takes courage, but do it and stick to it.
I often tell students that the cheapest tuition is learning from other people's mistakes.
Oh yeah, it's like parenting, Dr. Nelson. And I shouldn't say that with mom, but you kind of learn what you want to do, and there are certain things you go, God, I'm not going to do that. And my kids have learned well from that. They, because I'm a great example of what not to do. But I think that you're right on that. Just look around to the people around you. Sometimes you have people that seem burnout. I have one teacher that I thought was going to retire 10 years ago. She was done. She didn't even know the names of the kids in her advisory class. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm thinking she has to go. She has turned out to be one of our rock stars. She just, it was a rejuvenation. And I think she's losing money by teaching because she's been around so long. So sometimes it's not what it appears, but get out and talk to people face to face and have those conversations and be there to support them, good and bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Very good. Well, thank you for your, not only your advice, but your performance. It really means a lot to students to hear somebody who has been successful making a significant change. So
well,
thank you.
Dr. Nelson, you're one of my mentors and one of my heroes in education as well. So thanks for all you do. Good to talk to you.
You too.
Bye.